it's really a challenge to even think of a skilling program for makeshift kind of population. But we are really encouraged to hear that you have started breaking the gender stereotypes, and we did come across a group yesterday which spoke about the training which the BSDM has imparted to women to ply the e-rickshaws. And I think you also brought in a very pertinent point of looking at the skilling of the youth. Thank you so much, sir. We'll come back to you with more questions. But now I would like to turn over to Sir you, Shri Sunil Kumar Yadav. He is the mission director. And I think the only one question that I have for you, sir, is how do you see supporting this Bihar Urban Ultra Poor graduation program? Uh, a lot of the work which happens under the NULM is likely to support this program. So, what is the kind of role that you expect to play in shaping up this program and in taking this ahead?
Thank you so much. Post-lunch session has never been my favorite. Uh, Out of 120 years of experience which you mentioned, mine is just limited to 12 years in service of IS. So I'm sorry for that. I just got 12 years of experience to put in. Okay, serious stuff now. Uh, I'm mission director for National Urban Livelihood Mission for about a year. And I just like to say a few lines about the origin of the program and how Bihar is faring in that. National Urban Livelihood Mission took its genesis from the policy which came in 2007 about National Urban Housing and Habitat Policy 2007. So it talked about sustainable development of the habitats and universal and equitable access to land, shelter, and services. So that was the premise on which this National Urban Livelihood Mission started. Now, I was just talking to the team of BRAC and saying that they don't have to worry thinking that they have to start from the scratch. Already the mission is working here, and the components which they want to work on, and skill being one of them, we already have the database ready. Okay, we do agree that it is not the exhaustive or well-researched or well-surveyed data, but we do have the data, and we have done a bit of work on that as well. Explaining that what are components, we have got employment through skilling and placement. We have got a component there. We have got a component of employment, self-employment program. We have a component which looks up after the urban shelter for the urban poor who don't have the shelter. Then we have the component which looks after support for street vendors. And finally, we have a component which looks after social or institution development, social mobilization and institution development. Now, these are the components which have been working in Bihar, and already some kind of skeleton or structure is ready. So what I was saying is that the need now is to find out the gaps, where the gaps are existing, and fill in those gaps. Now, regarding poverty, I would like to just digress a little from the topic about skilling. If you say poverty in urban sector is a little bit complex, I would say it's more contextual. It is a lot bit different from what we experience in rural sector. It's a lot bit different, the programs, the poverty elevation programs, the community mobilization programs, which we had fairly good experience in terms of Jeevika and other organizations. It's going to be a bit different, and like Greg said, it's challenge. We don't know what is there. Because though we are working on it, but we haven't yet found a perfect solution of what all items we have to include into scaling, what are the real demands of the urban poor. Because urban poor, like it's a cohort of people who are coming out of either push factor or pull factor from the nearby areas, rural areas. They may want to continue with their traditional occupations, or they may not want to continue with their traditional occupations. So we have to look into that. We cannot simply say because this community has been working on bamboos, So we should blindly say that, okay, all will be making bamboos only. No, there may be some group in that which we want to diversify, which doesn't want to continue with that bamboo thing. So finding out the skilling aspect is going to be a challenge. Let me put it that way. We cannot uh, put them in some structure, in some statistical thing that these are the items which we take up for scaling. And Bihar, before that, I would say that all the studies and the researches which have been done is regarding the metros and other big cities. And Bihar falls neither of them. It is totally different. If you see the flavor of the people out here, what they do, their occupational preferences, their educational background, their other social background, is totally different from what we see in NCR, big cities, Bangalore, Hyderabad, or Kolkata, I would say. It's totally different. So this is here is a dark territory, and we are very thankful to BRAC, like they have just come in and they are ready to shoulder the responsibilities, and we'll see what comes up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Very pleased to hear that we already have a structure and a very well thought out program. And we've also visited a couple of the groups in the urban areas, and we feel that for us, this will be a very, very good starting point, and that we will not have to operate in an empty field. And I also quite agree with you that identification of the skilling needs is a very, very critical thing that we will all have to look into. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. May I now move on to you, Tini? So, Tini has significant experience of working on issues of agriculture and livestock, particularly with smallholder farmers. And she has worked a lot on sustainable livelihoods development programs in the rural context. But may I request you, Tini, to talk about, what are the potential opportunities, or I should say linkages, that you see in the rural and the urban skilling and the livelihoods sphere, if there are any? Yeah.
Thanks so much, Irina. And I just wanted to say that we are so delighted to be here. We have a wonderful partnership with Jeevika in rural areas where, we've been supporting Women's Economic Empowerment Program. It's also been wonderful to listen through the session since the morning, also to hear the Didis from the program who spoke about how they have graduated out of poverty. So I think there's a significant amount of learning from that program as well, which we can bring to this new program. Also just linked with what the mission director of NULM said, that it is complex. The whole issue of urban livelihoods is complex. It's also complex to really identify who the poor are. So I think the investment, given that we will start on a pilot program, perhaps the investment on who the poor are. In the context of Bihar, which has such a significant, such a strong agriculture portfolio, I also see immense possibilities of strengthening the agriculture-urban linkages. Some of the examples could be that the areas around Patna or the areas around Gaya are significant areas where vegetables are grown. There is a market here in Patna. How could we facilitate aggregation at rural areas and for that aggregation to come here and to create jobs along the way? So I would say let us look at the agri-urban linkages and try and strengthen those where I see immense opportunity over there. Also, I feel, given the very strong work that Jeevika has done in the rural areas, perhaps we can also start there. Like, it's not always true that people migrate for additional economic opportunities to urban centers. Often they migrate because they have nothing to keep them back in rural areas. So it is really the poorest in rural areas that migrate to urban areas, and the only thing that they have to offer is their labor. So could we start by actually mapping the migrants who come here and provide some skilling before they migrate also, so that they migrate at stronger terms. So basis some of the work that we had done in Uttar Pradesh, where we worked with migrants at the source. So we work in northern Uttar Pradesh, Bahraich, which is a major source destination for migrants, and the people from there go all the way to Mumbai. And when we were discussing with them as we designed the program, one of them said, we go as laborers. But if we could be trained on, say, shuttering, for example, we would already graduate to the next level of work. So that could be one possibility that we could think of. We have already such wonderful examples in the Jeevika program, the Didi Ke Rasoi. Now that initiative is very, very amenable to an urban context as well. Could we build further on that? Green Delights, which is another initiative which actually brings agricultural produce to urban areas. Could we do more of that? So the value addition to agricultural produce, I do feel that there is a lot there. Creating second earners in homes, looking at the livelihoods of women, for example. And again, I would say in Patna, can we map demand? What is the demand for services? Where is the real need? Is it around, say, home services? Is it around, say, to look at the elderly, given that there are also there's a lot of migration from Bihar to other countries also. They leave behind the elderly parents. So could that be an opportunity that we could look at as well? For urban livelihoods, I also feel that perhaps creating, and it's linked to the points that Gautam made in the previous session, the adaptability, strengthening adaptation, the nimbleness, so that as markets change, people can also adapt to that. So I think that is also important. So we also invest in our skilling programs and actually strengthening adaptation so that people can assess